So as we make our way through the Human Covenant War, or at least the last 6 months of the Human Covenant War, we've talked a lot about Slipspace, things moving out of Slipspace, things going into Slipspace. We recently just talked about the Battle of Earth, during which a Covenant carrier jumped to Slipspace right over the city of New Mombasa, basically destroying the city. And I figured today we'd take a closer look at what Slipspace is and how it impacts the world around it, how it works, and a little bit about how ships travel through it. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Now, many of us are familiar with a variety of different faster-than-light technologies. It's a key part of most science fiction. How to travel faster than light is one of the biggest problems with interstellar travel we face in reality, and most science fiction franchises have to find some way to solve that problem, and Slipspace is Halo's way of solving that problem. It's very different from a lot of other forms of faster-than-light travel, and it's actually surprisingly fleshed out for it being mostly an afterthought in the game. So today I wanted to discuss a little bit more of the specifics about how Slipspace works, and maybe even touch a little bit on why it was so destructive to the city of New Mombasa when the Covenant carrier jumped to Slipspace. So let's talk about what Slipspace is. It's actually technically an alternate dimension. When a ship travels to Slipspace, it leaves real space, our dimension, and transitions over to a secondary sort of sub-dimension. There, the laws of physics are different, allowing ships to travel close to or above the speed of light without affecting the way they perceive time. This allows ships to travel at several light years a day and not face catastrophic time differences between their time and time for the rest of the galaxy. Now, this isn't an alternate dimension like you would see in something like Rick and Morty, for example, where it's just a different place. This is described more as a nebulous concept. It's a space that doesn't actually have space, where time doesn't really exist outside of its relation to our real-world time, and if you were to look out the window during Slipspace travel, I'm not certain what you would see, but it's likely nothing. Well, there are supposedly several things in Slipspace. There are obviously ships traveling through Slipspace, there are also clouds of gas that would occupy this space, and occasionally comets and asteroids somehow find their way into Slipspace, something that's mentioned a couple times. Slipspace is more or less this big empty void, but the biggest advantage of it is different laws of physics that do allow ships to exceed the speed of light. As a result, most UNSC ships by this point in human history can travel about a light year or two a day when getting to and from a target, which, by the way, on the scale of the galaxy is really small. It would take UNSC ships a couple days to get from Earth to some of the nearest star systems, and a couple months to reach the fringes of human space. This is why a lot of UNSC vessels have cryopods on board. It may at first seem a little bit weird that if you're traveling faster than the speed of light, you would need to cryogenically freeze anyone to get through the trip, but the fact is these trips can still be pretty long, especially if you're traveling from one corner of human-controlled space to another corner of human-controlled space. You're looking at a trip of months, maybe even upwards of a year. But Slipspace isn't a perfect utopia either. It's kind of a hellish subdimension that you really don't want to be in unless you absolutely have to be. It's viciously radioactive, making it very dangerous for anyone in Slipspace. Transitioning from normal space to Slipspace is known to make people very sick. There are countless reports of people getting anything from headaches to heart failure transitioning from normal space to Slipspace. But on top of that, Slipspace is naturally hostile towards all matter from the regular universe, and most things that travel into Slipspace are destroyed instantly. The only things that can survive are things that are particularly shielded for this kind of environment, which is a shielding that is present on all UNSC and Covenant vessels, which allow them to use Slipspace. Even then, it's still very dangerous, and ships do go missing just traveling through Slipspace. And not just ships. There are reports of people simply vanishing during the transition and never being heard from again. Likely another weird side effect of this dimensional transition that ships have to make to travel through the medium known as Slipspace. But Let's talk about why it was so destructive to New Mombasa. After all, we just saw the Prophet of Regrets retreat from the human city, and the destruction and chaos it caused. What was all of that? Well, it's a combination of a few things. First things first, Slipspace is an incredibly radioactive environment, and when you open a portal to Slipspace to transition to that environment, you are letting a lot of that radiation out, creating a large radioactive event, something akin to a nuclear detonation. However, without the blast, the shockwave we see is actually created by the vanishing of the carrier. When that massive ship basically disappears from our reality, it leaves a big vacuum that is sucking in all the air around it, creating basically an implosion. Now, this isn't a problem when you're jumping to Slipspace in space, where you're more or less in a vacuum. I know there are occasional air molecules up there, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing like jumping into Slipspace, a few hundred meters above a major metropolitan center. When you're in space, there is no vacuum to be created, because you're already in a vacuum, and as such, there is no flow of air in or out of the space that is now vacant. By the way, the same thing happens in reverse. When ships leave Slipspace in an atmosphere, they force all of the air and matter that was there outward in a violent action that creates sort of a shockwave sound, which we hear when ships leave Slipspace within a planet's atmosphere. A few more tidbits about Slipspace. There are sensors that can be built to monitor Slipspace. I'm not entirely certain how these sensors would work, but it's likely that a sort of detecting element of the sensor is kept in Slipspace and relaying information back to a relay station that's in normal space. But regardless, objects through Slipspace can be tracked. While you can track objects in Slipspace, it's harder to track individual objects in Slipspace than in real space, resulting in large fleets of vessels often appearing as single large objects. This actually occurred right before the Battle of Reach, resulting in a delayed detection of the Covenant fleet that would ultimately besiege the human world. And the last thing I want to discuss is Slipspace wakes. These are fairly similar to the wakes of large ships moving in the water, a reaction from the space around it to a ship moving through Slipspace, and it allows other ships to basically ride those wakes like waves, giving them boosts or accelerations, which allows ships to travel much faster. That's why UNSC ships coming back from the Battle of Installation 05 were able to make it back in significantly less time because they were following the larger and faster Forerunner key ship, which had departed from High Charity, which left a much larger and more powerful Slipspace wake. At the end of the day, Slipspace is a fascinating form of faster-than-light travel that has massive effects on the way the Halo universe works, and it does play into some pretty key story elements, like during the Battle of New Mombasa, when the Prophet of Regret flees into Slipspace, destroying the city. If you'd like to learn about the Battle of Earth, which included the Battle of New Mombasa, I'll leave a link up here to my battle analysis breaking down the Battle of Earth, or at least the first day of the Battle of Earth, October 20th and 21st, 2552, and talking about how those events played out. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments which form of faster-than-light travel from science fiction is your favorite. Is it Slipspace from Halo, or hyperspace from Star Wars, or something else? Let me know down below. You can also let me know down below if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover from Halo, Star Wars, or anywhere else in science fiction. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.